So this Shabbat, we are going to be reading from Parshat Ekev, which is the now fourth Torah portion in the book of Deuteronomy. Fourth or third? Third. Okay. Note to self. Know the information before you spout it out. Devarim ve'et Chanat. Yes, third Torah portion. Did I miss one? Okay. I stumped myself. Are you awake? So, what if I told you that because you are here tonight, because you are here worshiping Shabbat, observing the law as it is stated in Exodus and in Leviticus and in Numbers and Deuteronomy, as it is stated that you should keep Shabbat, because you're here, because you are not laughing at the humor or lack thereof, because you are participating, because you are singing and praying, because you will have a wonderful meal with your friends and family after Shabbat, that your personal stock portfolio will increase on Monday morning. Like you'll wake up when the market opens, and by the end of business, when the market closes on Monday, your portfolio will be up. Will increase. What if I told you that? Would you believe me? I don't know. What if I told you that your most favorite food that is only at Fry's or Safeway, your favorite fruit or vegetable, whatever it is, that hasn't been there, Whole Foods, wherever it is, I bought a mango at Whole Foods this last week that was the size of a bowling ball. What if and that's one of my favorite foods. What if I told you that it would be there in abundance because you were here on Shabbat tonight? That food, that fruit that's never in the produce, and if it is, it's shvach, it's from some place that isn't supposed to be growing fruit like that this time of year, that all of a sudden it appeared out of nowhere. Abundance, in abundance, because you were here on Friday night. Would you believe me? Why not? Thank you. My point is that the answer to the above is yes. Not that you have to take my word for it, but if you read this week's Parsha, you have to take God's word for it. Because Moses tells the Israelites time and time again in this week's Parsha. In fact, what does the word ekev mean? Heal, H-E-E-L, heal, yes, and it is the root of one of our ancestors' names. Yaakov, yes. What does ekev mean? Heal is one. What did you say, Lance? Okay, because it's not as literal, but yes, that is one of the translations for ekev. It means to follow. In fact, Yaakov is called Yaakov because he follows Esau. Esav was born first. One of the Midrashim says that he was also pulling Esav by his heel as if to say, I'm first, I want to be first, which he ended up doing when he exchanged the blessing, or tricked his father out of the blessing. But it means to follow. Time and again in this Parsha, there are what in Deuteronomy becomes a lot of if-then scenarios where Moses says, if you do these things, follow God's commandments, obey God's commandments, then your stock portfolio will go up. Food will be in abundance. You will have beautiful homes. You won't even really have to landscape or garden because the flowers will grow themselves. Your lawn will mow itself. That kind of thing. That's really what's in this Parsha. And so the theological question that is always raised is it true? Does my behavior, specifically my observance of the commandments, my following of and obeying of God's commandments, will it lead me to personal and community gain? Will I be able to get something out of this? See, God is a very pragmatic God in this Parsha. God is very pragmatic. God will say over and again, Moses will say because he's speaking on God's behalf. If you do these things, if you obey, if you observe, then great things will happen. You will have fruit in its season. Rain will come in its season. You'll never have drought. Things will go very well for you. You will be making oodles of money and having oodles and tons of food. Why? Because you've observed my commandments. The question that we also have theologically is, are we okay with this? Are we okay with a religious system predicated on the belief that our actions lead to good things happening to us? Does our actions really have outcomes in a sort of cosmic way? Karma. Does karma work in Judaism? And the answer is, in this parsha, yes. But there's a problem. The other side, the flip side is, if you don't do these things, what will happen to your society, to your portfolio, to your fruit, to your rain, so on and so forth? Moses says to the Israelites in Ekev, so be careful that you don't forget to do these things, to obey God. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, then be careful, lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget Adonai your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. So I want to ask an open question and see if you're willing, ready, and able to answer it. What is Moses saying? Having just laid out for the people, if you show up to shul on a Shabbat, your stock portfolio will go up on Monday. If you go to shul on Shabbat and observe the mitzvot, your lawn will mow itself. The flowers will appear. You'll have enough food. What is Moses saying here? What is he saying? Yes. One potential answer, a possible answer is you could lose it all if you don't. So, don't forget, you can't just do it once, show up on a Friday night for Shabbat, and then your portfolio is fine, right? Don't forget, if you don't, then not just the opposite will happen, but what specifically will happen to you? If you are, so to speak, if you become sort of happy and rich. What? You'll be sad and poor. Why? Because you forgot to do it. Were you going to say something, Sally? Yeah.
The other side is that there's blessings, when you live your life a particular way, you're rewarded for making good choices, I guess, versus not hearing or not being connected.
So there are always rewards in the choices, consequences, we should say, positive and negative, in the choices that we make, is what you're saying. And so obviously there's this sort of system where God turns it into an observance of the mitzvot equals positive outcomes, and non-observance equals negative outcomes. And in fact, in a couple weeks, when we get to the blessings and the curses, we're going to see it specified. Blessed be the person who does this, cursed be the one who does that. Yeah, Greg? God pays attention to the details. How?
Well, if God knows where you've been and it's going to reward you specifically in a sort of specific, very person-specific way, you can't get more personal than that.
Every individual has their own bank account, so to speak, with God, their own mitzvah account with God. And God knows, sorry to mix the metaphor, if you're naughty or nice. Sorry. It's the first thing that came to my head. But God knows. There's a system where God has an individual check account, if you will, of your mitzvot and your non-mitzvot, and therefore it's very personal, and you will be impacted. Yes?
So maybe it's not about rewards. Maybe it's about coming and the spirituality of being here. And by doing that, you do not need to be so overly concerned about the things in your life.
So, very good point. Maybe it's a deeper level, almost spiritual, cosmic system that's at play, where you shouldn't just worried about rewards and making more money and having more food for your mitzvot. It should come organically. You should do it because it's the right thing to do, because it's inherent in you to want to do these things, because not necessarily, Bobby Roth was very kind to have me on his radio show today on 1510 Money Radio, and we talked about, one of the things we talked about was delayed gratification versus instant gratification. And so if you live your life with this constant need for instant gratification, if I show up to shul, my portfolio will go up on Monday, instead of delayed gratification, which is it's part of a cumulative or comprehensive whole, then you lose the spiritual side. You're just doing what you're doing for the gain and not necessarily for the inherent uplift. Someone else was going to say something? I wonder, one more person, maybe? Susie? It goes back to like karma. Like the more positivity, the more positive you do. It's that line in that song that we always sing. Well, it's from the I think it's from Pirkei Avot, mitzvah gorer mitzvah, that one mitzvah leads to another, that leads to another. You may start a trend, right? Yeah. And the other side, avirah gorer avirah, that a sin can lead to a sin. Yeah, Gail. Yes. It's a what? Oh. Right. Right. What you do can impact others. This is also the spiritual part of it. This is what makes it uniquely Jewish. Like, if I do something in observance of the commandments that is inherently good, of course, I can impact, sure, I can get a reward for it, but before you know it, it starts to spread. It creates an energy. It goes back to that idea of karma. It creates a positive energy and a positive spirit. The real challenge of society is found in that verse and in this parsha. It's found in other parshiot too, but specifically in this one. What Moses is doing here, when he says, and no one really picked up on this, but that's fine. What he says is, as a sort of punchline for if you forget, when he says, beware lest your heart grow haughty and you forget Adonai your God. See, Moses is speaking to a new generation of Israelites. He's not speaking to the people that are there, but this is not for the people who left Egypt, right? They already messed up. They already built the golden calf, and they kvetched the entire book of Numbers, and they didn't get it. At the end of the day, our ancestors who left Egypt didn't really get it, so God's really speaking to the next generation, to their kids, to their grandkids. And he turns to this new generation and says to them, you thought the real trial was this 40-year wonderful, not so wonderful, trek in the wilderness, and that this is the easy part. But really what Moses is saying to the next generation is the real challenge isn't what we're doing up to this point. You know, he's standing in the steppes of Moab. They're about to enter the land. It wasn't the journey that was the hard part, but really is the affluence that you will acquire when you go into the land. See, God may have made this pragmatic decision, which is to say, I guarantee you, I did not redeem you, release you from slavery to be miserable. I released you, I freed you to enter the land of Israel, a land flowing with milk and honey, and to live high on the hog, to live with wealth, to live with rain, to live with all of these creature comforts. Why? Because I gave you the Torah. And in the Torah is the way to go about creating your society. The challenge will be, will you or will you not observe it? You think you had despair and suffering along the desert from all the kvetching? Wait until you see how hard it is once you have wealth and acquire things and have herds and flocks and sheep and goats and fruit in its season. Wait till you see how hard freedom is. Wait until you see. You think slavery was hard? You think the journey was hard? Wait until you see the consequences of getting wealth, of having money, of having things. The lesson is that the people lose social cohesiveness and closeness and create distance between themselves and God and each other when they become wealthy. When you forget about where you came from and about your past, here's what happens. When you get haughty, Moses is saying to the next generation, when you get high on the hog and you think money and wealth are the answer to all things, look how great I am, haughty, this is what happens. Inequality grows in the society. We lose our community. We lose our village. Like it was in some ways better to be poor and slaves. We lose that. And our society actually grows weaker. The real challenge is not poverty, according to the Torah. The real challenge is affluence. The challenge is having too much and not knowing when to say when. And so this is what's going to happen now in Deuteronomy and Devarim. All of the things that you said, by the way, are correct. All of your comments and answers are correct. But I wanted to focus, in conclusion, I wanted to focus on this last part. Because I think this is something that our society, our modern society, our contemporary society is suffering from right now. We hear politicians over and again, especially in the run-up to an election, talk about how great America is, how we're the richest, most wealthy country on the planet, how we're the greatest country on the planet, the richest country on the planet. I think a very fair question is to say, what do we have to show for that? What do we have to show for that? The challenge of affluence is great. If we're so rich, why do we have so much inequality? Why have we lost social cohesion? People have their relationships with their computers, not with other people anymore. Why has our society grown weaker? The next parshiot in Deuteronomy are all about this. And this is why you have to come back to shul, not only to increase your stock portfolio. It's about how to make sure that a society does not collapse as a product or as a function of the people within the society growing disparate from each other. The next parshiot will be about collective identity and responsibility, as Gail was saying, looking at the community and the impact of our choices on the community. It's about creating a society where there is justice, where the poor are cared for, where the rule of law is upheld in a way that is just, right? In a couple of weeks, we're going to read Tzedek Tirdof, justice shall you pursue. In a recognition of the humanity in every person, we will learn that to recognize that there is always something greater than you. And so it's time for us on this Shabbat to look at ourselves and to look at the potential and the possibilities of our future, of the coming generations, as Moses did. Because he finishes his comments to that generation by saying, remember that it's God who gives you the power of wealth. To get wealth is a function of God in the fulfillment of the covenant that God made as an oath to your fathers and your mothers, as is still the case. The Parsha's punchline in these sections is, if we forget all that God did for us in the past, we are liable to think that our prosperity is due to our present, to our own power. Moses then reminds us in this parsha and plants a very important seed for the next parshiot, that the very power which leads to prosperity is a gift from God. It is something that comes from God. The answer to the question, will my stock portfolio go up if I attend shul, is yes. But, when you make that money on Monday, remember that that came from God, not from something that you did or did not do. That it came from God's power, not your own. And so on this Shabbat, let us look at the gifts in our lives, not just money, not just wealth, not just beautiful homes and food, but the gifts, the big gifts in our lives. And let us be willing to think and to say to ourselves on this Shabbat, these are from God, the God of our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, the God of Moses. Lest we forget that our gifts are from God, lest we create a haughtiness within that does not enable us to carry that covenant, that tradition of goodness and kindness and mercy to the next generations. The power to choose between those two is ours. Ekev, follow, obey, observe, and then understand that you have the potential and the power to create a world in which God deems holy and just and righteous. Shabbat Shalom. We have some